And today we're super excited. We'll be discussing AI generated governance and really what happens as AI starts writing your governance policies for you. I'll be going over a quick agenda and be passing to Chris to dive into material. But in terms of an agenda, we'll start with how AI is changing data governance, why speed isn't the same as security, what makes a control actually defensible when it comes to audits and regulators, and how you should be building your governance for this AI era. But really, everything we talk about today comes back to one question. If an AI agent writes your security policy, who's going to own that risk? With that, Chris, I'll hand it over to you to get us started.
Yep. So thank you, Nick. And I think that question is certainly thought-provoking, both in our industry and broader industries, and maybe even broader beyond that into society is like who's accountable for what an
Of
AI
course.
agent does. And what we're talking about here is an area where accountability really, really matters. Um, so, it's no secret to everyone, AI is generating code in mere seconds, thousands, millions of tokens per second. AI is relatively fast compared to what humans are capable of doing. Um, and all of these platforms, they have AI agents in them now, and they're doing all sorts of things like classification rules, masking, access controls. If you stretch it, you can probably get a governance workflow out of it. And so that's
Mhm.
really attractive, right? Because these are things that used to take humans a lot of time and thought. Just the mere act of authoring the technology infrastructure, the code to facilitate these things, right? So the position that we have taken, and that we take as a company, we see this with our customers. A lot of this thought that you're going to hear today is not us just in a vacuum or an echo chamber. We work actively with all of our customers and prospects to understand where we're at on these things. Writing the policy just isn't the same as governing data. The act of writing the policy, while AI can certainly help you with that, it is a task. Tasks are things that you do. You do it once, you check it off of a
Yep.
list, and you say, good to go, task complete. A lot of our customers is being that, we focus primarily in regulated industries like banking and finance, not exclusively those industries, but we do have a lot of banking and finance customers. A lot of our customers, they don't need something to complete tasks so much as they need to build a practice. And practice is a discipline that you build. So it's not just the act of authoring the policy, it's reviewing the policy, determining ownership of the policy, monitoring, figuring out what's going to happen with organizational changes over time. And then you get to go in front of your auditors and you get to defend it. And your auditors are probably going to find holes and places you need to go back and fix. It's really something, it's
Mhm.
never done. It's never a task that's complete. Tasks are complete. A practice is ongoing. And so the question isn't, can AI write the policy? It can. There's not any question about that. The question is, can you defend? And can you really, let's just forget about defending. Can you meet the controls for a second with AI? That's probably a big question mark. And then the bigger question mark is, can you defend the control?
That's a great point. And Chris, before we move to the next slide, I had one question there because to your point, we're having these conversations with our current customers and our prospects. And I keep asking myself that, is this really a new problem that AI generated governance is causing, or is this an old problem that's just moving faster now that AI is involved? I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
No, it is certainly an old problem that is moving faster, with kind of the illustrious nature of AI. Everybody wants to be AI
Mhm.
enabled. Everybody wants to get more for less. Um, Writing a policy was never, inherently difficult. You didn't need an R&D project to write a
Yeah.
policy. You never needed to write a patent to write a policy. It was never particularly difficult. And so AI does augment the human need in that already not difficult process. What is difficult is all of the surrounding things around what we're calling here as the practice of having a good governance program and a practice of governing your data and the practice of securing your data.
That's awesome. That's exactly what I was thinking. And here, I'll move on to the next slide for you.
So let's just be very pointed here. Where does AI assisted governance fall short? any large organization, they've got workflows, right? Workflows and tools like ServiceNow, organizational workflows, even chains of command. AI has no concept and certainly is not going to respect that. The intent of the policy is going to get lost in translation. A lot of the technical policies that are written, they're sourced out of English language policies that are written in some compliance doctrine somewhere in the organization. And those policies have intent and they have purpose, right? We wrote this control to satisfy this requirement of this compliance standard. That is all intent. That's all context. Um, your Snowflake Cocoa or your Databricks agent or any of those things, it doesn't have any concept of the business need for the policy. What is the policy trying to solve for? If you're just going with your AI agent, you're saying, hey, write a policy so only these groups of people can see this data in this format, and these groups of people get access to the plain text. It's going to do that. It's not going to have any notion of why you did that. Therefore, you don't stand a chance at enforcing that over a long period of time. Um, Review becomes superficial, right? The code looks correct, ship it, right?
Mhm.
Or you might test it, maybe, but more than likely, it's code's correct, right? It's the policy. How could it be
Yeah.
wrong? And then policy sprawl accelerates because again, you're not able to manage the policy over time, right? New organizations are created, new teams are created, old teams are merged into other teams. And you're just going to have policy sprawl. And very, very quickly, you have a situation where you have policies that really don't mean anything.
That makes a lot of sense. And to our both our Carls earlier, we work with a lot of regulated companies here. So I'm curious with these four, maybe it's a combination of all four, which of these can cause the most damage when these policies are actually start being tested when it comes to an audit or a real-time, data security incident? What of these should be the organizations the most concerned about when it comes to those kind of damages that can come from this?
So from an auditor assessor perspective, policy sprawl is certainly probably the biggest risk because your institutional knowledge, kind of like the top right point there,
Hmm.
your institutional knowledge gets lost, and then you have holes in your policy in spaces where the policy is defined, but you might not know what that policy means anymore and how to map that back all the way back through an organization and into a control. This is probably my favorite slide in the entire deck. The assessors, so for Alter, I deal with our assessors directly, along with a couple of members of my team here. The assessors are going to come in and you're not going to present a bunch of SQL code as your policies. Like you're just not. The assessors don't want to look at that. They want to look at the entire life cycle of the policy. So it's who approved the control, right? So controls are most compliance frameworks are a set of requirements. You develop controls, and then you test the controls, you build out the controls, and then you test the controls, and that's what defines compliance, right? And so it's like, why does the policy exist? What control are we satisfying? How was it enforced, and over what? And how can I prove to you, Mr. Assessor, that this happened? Your AI agent is not going to be able to help with that. If this was the case, let me just be very a little bit hyperbolic here, but not maybe
Hmm.
not so much. If this was the case, there would be no need for assessors, and there would be no need for data security function. It would just be AI prompts asking questions, right, to each other, agent to agent communication. There's clearly still a need because we still have humans accessing this data. The humans still need to be in the loop. We still need all of these human constructs because going back to what we said in the beginning, the human is what needs to be held accountable. So we came up with these kind of verticals here, and your assessment is all about defensibility, right? Here's what I'm doing as a business. Here's my business practice. Do you agree with it or not, Mr. Assessor or Mrs. Assessor, really? So determinism, ownership, auditability, protection depth, and portability. Um, does the control behave consistently every single time? Is it reliable in that sense? Meaning I don't have something that's maybe enforced here and not enforced here, or something that produces an output that probably even worse, which is undefined. Do I know who owns? Um, do I know who owns that policy? Can I see how that policy has changed over time? What led to those changes? Maybe I added a group to access data, or I gave permission to mask data to a specific group or something like that. Can I just see how the current state of the policy came to be? Um, the depth of the protection, meaning here's a list of all of my sensitive data, here's a list of all of the policies and controls I've placed over that data, and then the portability. So does the governance follow wherever the data goes? In today's ecosystem, especially with AI and other use cases, and I'm not here negating or arguing against the value of AI. It's so crystal clear what does need to happen is we need to be responsible about AI.
Of course.
So as the customers and as the users take that data and they move it into other systems programmatically, or even just exporting to CSV and playing with it in Excel or things like that, does the governance,
Mhm.
does the security follow the data to all of the places that it may go? So we took the same verticals here and we mapped them to what Alter does. Alter provides you determinism. It's no code. It's deterministic policy enforcement. You can see how the policy was evaluated in the platform, and you can see why a decision was made. It's very, very simple. You can see who owned the policy, um, the approvals, and establish kind of clear sets of accountability. It's auditability. That's a big thing for us, is being able to see when the policy not just was changed, but also when the policy was evaluated, and how it was evaluated. The depth of the protection. So maybe it's not just enough to mask the data. Maybe I need, for specific subsets of data, I need to implement like a secondary encryption, like a format preserving encryption or something like that, or maybe dynamic
Mhm.
masking, or maybe just plain access control. Being able to provide depth of a technical solution to meet the needs of the control, to meet the needs of the requirements for the policies, is very, very important. And then portability. What's going to happen when that data moves around? Inevitably, it's going to happen. If you think it's not going to happen, you're probably fooling yourself. I'd love to hear a compelling use case where this is not a concern. But when that data moves around, what is going to happen to it?
Chris, thank you so much for taking us through this. One last question before we just kind of wrap up here, this power session we put together. With everything we discussed, what's really the one or two things you want to leave as kind of the final note for our audience to remember as they start approaching AI generating governance?
Yeah, so I would encourage people to just think, using the AI agent to draft your technical policies, and really a lot of people are just going straight to production with those. You're really just solving one step of the problem for those customers and those prospects. I should say prospects, not customers. For those prospects that are doing that, um, I'm curious to hear from you what your audit looks like next year. I guarantee you, you're not going to think it's going to be as easy as you think it's going to be. It might even be harder. You're really only augmenting one step of the problem.
That's a great point. I think a great point to end this conversation on. I want to thank you guys so much for people who are joining today, and thanks again, Chris, for just walking us through this. Of course, if today's conversation has you thinking or is already a problem you're facing, you want to keep the conversation going, please feel free to contact us at alter.com. That's AOTR.com. Everyone have a great day, and Chris, thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.